What is up, ladies and gentle nerds? It's your boy Graham, also known as HamHawks42 on the internet, and today it is Random Wednesday here on the Overthinking MTG podcast, the show where we take a look at an individual Magic card and talk about it for at least 10 minutes. So let's go ahead and head on over to scryfall.com and click that random card button. Let's see what we run into, and we're going to talk about it for a little bit. Alright, so today we see Merfolk Branchwalker. So Merfolk Branchwalker is a 2-1 for 2 from Ixalan. It is a Merfolk scout that says when Merfolk Branchwalker enters the battlefield, it explores. And fortunately for us, this has the explore reminder text because for the life of me, I can never remember what explore does because Ixalan was actually just falling out of favor when I first jumped onto Arena. So I've seen plenty of Ixalan cards, but I've barely played with them myself, if I'm completely honest. And Explore was a major mechanic from Ixalan, which makes sense because Ixalan is the plane of like diving into the jungle, Indiana Jones style. Although that's also the Zendikar, I suppose, pulls a lot of inspiration from those types of franchises as well. But this, I mean, it's pirates, it's dinosaurs. It's delving into the jungle to explore lost ruins. It's all that good stuff. So Explore actually, as a mechanic, makes good sense for that style of set, or at least a set with that type of aesthetic. So let's see, what does Explore do? Reveal the top card of your library, put that card into your hand if it's a land. Great. So draw a card if it's a land. Otherwise, you put a +1/+1 counter on this creature, and then put the card back on top or put it into your graveyard. So it's a quasi-surveil. If it's a land, you get it for free, which is great. You get it right into your hand. If it's not a land, you get to buff the creature. So it's a 2-1 for 2 that could come down as a 3-2 for 2. And it can also filter the top card of your library. So it either draws you a card or it's a 3-2 for 2. That's actually a great rate. And it lets you choose whether or not you want the top card of your library, unless it's a land, in which case it just gives it to you. That's lovely. Merfolk Branchwalker is fantastic. This is just a cool card. And it's a Merfolk, which is a relevant creature type. Although, interestingly enough, it is a Merfolk in green. One of the things that Ixalan brought is interesting color pairs to existing tribes. Like, for example, I believe Ixalan was the first time that vampires showed up in white. All of a sudden, vampires were white and black. Because prior to that, I believe they were just black. And on Innistrad, they're primarily black and red. But on Ixalan, they were black and white, which is a different twist on kind of a classic creature type. And Merfolk had been, for the vast majority of history in Magic, Merfolk had been exclusively blue. They had been a staple in blue. Lord of Atlantis and all these other cards were like older cards that were Merfolk, and they were all blue. I mean, there were a number of them. Merfolk of the Pearl Trident comes to mind as well. I believe that was a vanilla creature back in the day. Anyway, I could be wrong on that. But there are these... So Merfolk were blue, and a lot of them were not great, if we're honest. But they decided to buff Merfolk up, give them some good stuff, and they made them blue-green, which was a different take on Merfolk. And so here we have a Merfolk that's mono-green, which is one that you don't see every day. Now, and I mean, if you're on Arena and you're playing in Historic, the current Merfolk deck is currently blue-green. And to be honest, I know there are Merfolk decks in other formats as well, like Modern Merfolk, for example. I'm not as familiar with those decks, but I wouldn't be surprised if they at least have a splash of green in them, because a lot of cool Merfolk came out in Ixalan that are very powerful, that are blue-green, including a Merfolk Lord, if I'm not mistaken. That was pretty darn good. I believe it was a 3-mana creature that actually has a really slick animation on Arena. I talk a lot about Arena because that's the primary mode by which I play Magic, and so it's just one of those things that it's my current context. Let me put it that way. And so Ixalan is a little bit of a blind spot for me on Arena, but I gotta say, Merfolk Branchwalker and the Explore cards are all very cool, and they provide decent value. There were also cards, if I'm not mistaken, that explored multiple times. Like there was one card that explored twice, which was really cool. It gives you the ability to filter the top card of your library twice, and buff itself dramatically, or draw 2 cards if they're both lands, or some mix and match thereof. Just good stuff. Merfolk Branchwalker, the other thing I'm struggling with here, if I'm honest, is coming up with more to talk about, because Merfolk Branchwalker is very straightforward. This is a 2-1 for 2 in a relevant creature type that has the keyword mechanic for the set on it. This is not an uncommon type of card. Interestingly enough, that choice of wording might be a little off because it is in fact an uncommon card, and its rarity is in fact uncommon. But this is a common type of card that we see in design, where they choose a basic 1/1 or a 2/2, or in this case a 2/1, for 2 mana that just has whatever the keyword is. And depending on how powerful the keyword is, it might cost 2 mana, it might cost 3 mana, etc. But in this case with Explore, I feel like 2/1 for 2 is reasonable, because at this point we've even seen cards like 3/2s for 2 with upside as being relatively tame. Like power creep has gotten to a point where, although Ixalan is a set that we don't associate with power creep, so power creep has gotten to a point where we no longer associate a 2/2 for 2 as on rate. It's just not anymore. It needs to have upside. So a 2/1 for 2 is already behind the 8 ball. So the fact that this comes with the Explore edition, so the ability to draw a card is very, very meaningful. It's very valuable. The ability to get a +1/+1 counter is also meaningful and also valuable. So the fact that this card can do one of those two things, but you don't have control over which one, is an interesting way to give it a power boost without making it overpowered. Because a vanilla 3/2 for 1 and a green would be quite good. That would be very strong because it would be able to slot into multiple decks. Meanwhile, we have cards like Werewolf Pack Leader, which is a 3/3 for 2 green, which is above the previously established rate of cards. And let me explain what I mean by that. Being on rate is the idea of a vanilla creature for 2 mana being a 2/2, like that's a good body. A vanilla 3 mana creature being a 3/3, or a vanilla 4 mana creature being a 4/4. You get the idea. Those used to be kind of the standard assumptions. Like if I'm playing a creature on turn 4, I want it to be a 4/4, or I want it to have 4 power or 4 toughness or some variation thereof, and some kind of upside that makes it worthwhile. So when we see cards like, for example, Olivia Crimson Bride, that is a 3/4 for 6, that is drastically below rate. So when you just look at the stat line of that card, it's like, okay, this better have a good something going on in its text box. And it happens to in that case. That reanimation ability that she has is very, very strong and worth the price of admission. In the case of Merfolk Branchwalkers, if it was a vanilla 2/1 for 2, it would be below rate. That 1 toughness is a very, very significant downside. But Exploring is a reasonable upside that can change it. And it can, as I said, be above rate as a 3/2 for 2. Because that would be just a good card. A 3/2 for 1 and a green can slot into multicolored decks, unlike Werewolf Pack Leader. And it would be a decent body that, when we think of high power creatures, it's easier to think of them as good attackers, which they can be, but having 3 power on a 2 toughness body is also a very good blocker, because that's able to block 3 toughness creatures and kill them. Now, it will probably die in the exchange because it only has 2 toughness itself, but that is very valuable on defense. A high power can mean a lot on defense. Don't forget that. Very, very useful stuff. So I gotta say, Merfolk Branchwalker is interesting. The other cool thing that I like about this card is the artwork. It's no surprise. Magic artwork is beautiful. It's absolutely fantastic. I think the use of green as well as purple in like the Merfolks, I don't know if those are fins or if that's a garment that they're wearing. There's the splash of purple. Actually, it appears to be like actual fins that the part of the Merfolk's body. I think the fact that the majority of the canvas is green, but there's this purple splash, which I suppose means that the camouflage, either the camouflage is not particularly good for this creature, or this is a part of the jungle that the Merfolk Branchwalker lives in, where very colorful flowers and very colorful animals are very common, in which case a little bit of purple would actually make you blend in more easily. That's just something I find fascinating. It's something I find interesting, because it's easy to lose. One of the things, let me put it this way. One of the things I love to do is looking at fantastical creatures and trying to think, how would this creature truly survive in its native environment? Which I know is a little bit, it's overthinking for sure, but that's on brand for me, right? That's what we do. I find that fascinating, and a lot of fantastical creatures don't really hold up to that stress test, because when you think of the natural environment, it's like, well, what would they eat? That's a good question. You know, how could a creature that size survive in these types of conditions? Usually the answer is that they probably couldn't, but it's fantasy, it's magic, just accept it. And to be honest, I'm okay with that. Suspending disbelief is fine. I'm willing to go ahead and do that. But in this case, we have a humanoid creature who clearly lives in this jungle environment that is intelligent, it's using tools, and it's got coloring on its body as well as garments that allow it to blend into its environment. So clearly this is some kind of hunter. This is some kind of warrior. And its creature type is scout. So that makes sense. This is a soldier of some kind. This is a scout. So they would be nimble. They would be fast, presumably. They also are capable of fighting if they need to. And I feel like that all comes together in this card, and it comes together in the artwork very well. The artwork, for those listening on the audio, depicts this merfolk, who's a very colorful merfolk, although their body's primarily green, kneeling on a branch that is draped over a river. There appears to be a waterfall in the background. I have to say the composition of the image is beautiful. They did a great job. The artist, Kieran Yanner, did a phenomenal job putting this artwork together. I gotta say, really well done. And this card is just cool. Like, it's just a neat card. It's a very simple card. This looks like a decent draft card, and it tells a story of this creature quite nicely, or this merfolk. I shouldn't say creature, because merfolk are intelligent beings. So this person, I suppose, this fantastical individual, it tells the story very well. And I gotta say, I enjoy that. I enjoy cards that tell a compelling story, and we got that today. So thank you so much for hanging out. I appreciate you. This has been the Overthinking MTG podcast. If you're watching on the YouTube, please like and subscribe. And if you're listening rather on the podcast feed, please leave a 5-star review in your podcast catcher of choice. I would appreciate it very, very much. Thank you so much, and I'll catch you on the next one.